Hey up! Right, I'll try not to keep you too long today, but we're going to take a look at MOTONE's new crash bar for the water-cooled Triumph Bonneville Twins. And as far as I'm aware, it fits all models except the Speedmaster and the Bobber. Well, actually, there is a possibility that it will fit those models because the frames are extremely similar, but these bars are so new that MOTONE hasn't had a chance to test that possibility yet, so your best bet is to keep an eye on the listing on their website, which obviously I will leave a link to. Also, between now and the new year, MOTONE are running a Christmas discount special, accessible via a code, which again I'll leave in the video description, and that will allow you 17% off any MOTONE product from their official UK website. Now, these crash bars are a fairly sort of standard compact wing design, and they've got a bit of a strange name. But I'm told there is a story that goes with that strange name. These are the MOTONE Customs Craig crash bars. Now, I was given a very brief sort of account of the story. Apparently Sam at MOTONE has a friend called Craig who has a Street Twin, and he was offered a set of the early prototypes of these crash bars to test on his bike, which he declined, stating that he's a safe rider and he doesn't have accidents. He then promptly went out and wrote his bike off. And so I'm told wearing a tinted visor during the hours of darkness may or may not have been a contributing factor. Now, Sam maintains that if he had fitted the bars as requested, they would probably have rendered enough protection to stop the bike from being written off. And so to commemorate this incident, he named the bars the Craig Crash Bars, which I suppose sort of makes sense. So as far as I'm aware, Craig was okay, by the way. Well, as okay as you can be if you include Sam in your circle of friends. Now, generally speaking, there are two ways you can construct crash bars. You can construct them as all one piece, but then that tends to limit you to only being able to secure it to the frame of the bike, which isn't ideal, because in the event of an accident, you stand a good chance of twisting the frame. Or you can construct them as two separate pieces, which allows you to integrate them at the point where the cradle meets the engine, which greatly reduces the risk of an impact twisting your frame, but it comes at the expense of the overall strength and integrity of the bars themselves. Now, to overcome these issues and give the best of both worlds, what they've done is they've created a two-part crash bar system that interlock via a male and female part. One sort of telescopes into the other. The beauty of this is that it gives you the strength of a single-piece crash bar with the convenience of a two-part system, so that you can use the engine cradle interface for maximum performance and protection. And then when it comes to the mounting brackets, they've taken things another step further. The whole thing is fabricated from mirror polished 300 series stainless steel, and whereas most manufacturers would just go for flat tabs in order to fasten the system onto the bike, MOTONE have gone the extra mile and fabricated these buttress style mountings which will resist bending. It's an immensely strong design. So in the event of a crash, some of the impact is transferred along the bar to the other side, not just concentrated on the side of impact. I think as far as crash bar design goes, this is about as good as it gets. The whole thing attaches to the bike using just 4 mounting points. These bolts are at the top, which represent the strongest part of the frame, and the lower engine cradle mount at the bottom. The whole procedure is actually pretty simple and straightforward. The only issue is that none of these bolts have captive nuts on the back. They're all loose nuts, which means you have to get a spanner on them, and access is very limited. It's a 17mm nut on the back, and I would recommend the use of a stubby or short 17mm open-ended spanner for this. I don't have one, which did complicate matters, but you know, if you persevere, you can do it with a standard open-ended spanner. The bolts themselves are a 10mm TX, and according to my Haynes manual, these should be tightened up to 40 Newton meters, which isn't a huge amount. So, starting on the left-hand side, carefully remove the nut and the bolt. Be very careful not to drop and lose the nuts. I did on the top fastener, and I was looking for it for about half an hour. The top one is the most difficult. The bottom one actually is pretty accessible. That's me pretending that I'd retrieved the nut from its original position. I didn't. It was wedged way down somewhere on the sump guard, hiding from me. But this gives you an idea of what you're dealing with. Now, the left-hand side crash bar is actually the female part. This is the part that the other side slides into. One thing I will say about this system is that absolutely everything lined up precisely. There were no issues whatsoever. Offer your bar up and then just reinsert the appropriate bolts to sort of allow it to hang in place while you get those pesky nuts on the back. Now, it's bad enough taking these nuts off, but with the crash bar in place, you'll find that your access to them is limited even more. This is what's known in DIY motorcycle mechanic circles as a first-class twat knacker. I did have a look at removing the radiator to make access to these nuts easier, but the hoses are way too stiff, which means you're going to have to take the hoses off, which means draining the coolant off, and the whole job turns into a really big job. To be honest, I think you're better off just persevering the way that I did it. Assistance from a second person who can get line of sight on the end of the bolt and hold a spanner in place might be advantageous. I was sort of fumbling around in the dark really whilst trying to give the camera the best angle. Either way, this is doable. It's just a bit awkward. I mean, this entire job from start to finish took me probably less than an hour. And it is a little bit frustrating. I would say probably 70% of that time was trying to hold those nuts on the back in place and get a reasonable purchase on them with that open-ended spanner so that I could actually tighten these bolts up properly. But if everything was too easy, it wouldn't be as satisfying, would it? The other side is exactly the same procedure. Remove those two nuts and bolts. And I should say, obviously, you only do one side at a time because you're unfastening the engine cradle bolts. If you undid both at the same time, there is a danger of the engine shifting in its mountings, which probably isn't a good thing. I genuinely managed not to drop it this time. Right, fitting your right hand side crash bar is exactly the same, except you've got to insert that male part on the right hand crash bar into the female part on the left hand crash bar. As I said earlier on, I was really impressed by the precision of the whole fit of this, assembly from MOTONE Customs. There were no issues with it whatsoever. Just replace your bolts and your nuts, fasten everything up just as you did the other side, and the job is complete. Male and female part married up absolutely precisely with no gap, although allowing for differences between machines, a 1 to 2 millimeter gap isn't an issue. In an ideal world, I think we would all prefer having crash bars on our motorcycles, but quite often you know, the designs can end up being a bit of an eyesore. Personally, I think MOTONE have done a damn good job with these compact bars. They're not too in your face, but they stick out far enough to protect your exhaust and your engine casings, i.e. the most expensive bits to replace. And like all MOTONE products, you know, once fitted, they look premium. They also are just big enough to accommodate a micro auxiliary light if that's your thing. Once again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this and my other videos, and in doing so helping to support this channel. I really do appreciate it. I'd also appreciate it if you would leave a like. Consider subscribing to the channel if you're not already a subscriber, and if you do subscribe, please hit the notification bell and ensure that your notifications are enabled. I will of course be back on Friday with that ghost story, the last video of 2022. So until then, if you're riding, please ride safely, and I'll see you soon.